A man in his early 50s comes home after another long day at work. He places his keys on the same small table near the door, takes off his jacket, checks what he has in the fridge, and starts preparing dinner. There is no one waiting for him, but there is also no obvious sign that something is missing. His house is quiet, his routine is organized. He knows exactly how he likes his coffee in the morning, what time he goes for a walk, what projects he wants to finish on the weekend, and how he wants to spend his evenings. His life has a rhythm. A few days later, he is sitting with old friends at a backyard barbecue. Someone asks a question that seems harmless. "Have you ever thought about getting married again?" He smiles. Maybe he has heard this question many times before, and his answer is simple. My life is already complete. The conversation moves on, but that sentence reveals something much deeper than most people realize. Because when a man from Generation X reaches his 50s or 60s and has never remarried after a divorce or a major relationship, people often assume there must be a simple explanation. Maybe he never found the right person. Maybe he was too hurt to try again. Maybe he became comfortable being alone. Maybe he stopped believing in relationships. We naturally search for a reason because we tend to interpret absence as evidence of something missing. A missing wedding ring, a missing partner, a missing piece of the story. But what if the absence of another marriage is not always about what was lost? What if it is also about what was rebuilt? Because for some men, staying single for decades is not a sign of failure, emotional weakness, or inability to love. Sometimes it represents independence. Sometimes it represents adaptation. Sometimes it represents a person who discovered that his identity no longer depends on being someone's husband. And sometimes, hidden beneath that independence, there may also be a fear of going through the same pain again. The outside behavior looks identical. The psychological meaning can be completely different. So the real question is not, why didn't he get married again? The deeper question is, did he choose a life of independence because he found freedom, or because he learned how to protect himself? For many people, the image of a divorced man who never remarries creates a specific assumption. They imagine someone emotionally closed off, someone who was damaged by his past, someone who gave up. But that interpretation comes from a cultural expectation that marriage is the natural destination of adulthood. For generations, especially for many men growing up in America during the second half of the 20th century, success often followed a familiar script: build a career, buy a home, provide for a family, stay committed, be dependable. The idea of a successful adult life was often connected to being needed by others. So, when a man steps away from that path, people sometimes struggle to understand him. They see the empty passenger seat in his car and assume loneliness. They see the quiet house and assume sadness. They see independence and assume emotional distance. But sometimes they are looking at a person who simply rebuilt his life around a different definition of fulfillment. Because after a major relationship ends, something much bigger than the relationship itself can disappear. Identity can disappear. For years, a man may have defined himself through his role: husband, father, provider, partner, the person who handled responsibilities and carried the weight of the family. Then suddenly, the structure changes. The home feels different. Weekends feel different. Even small decisions feel different. No one asks what he thinks about dinner plans. No one expects him home at a certain time. No one shares the small frustrations and victories of everyday life. At first, that freedom can feel uncomfortable, but over time, something interesting can happen. A man begins discovering himself outside of the relationship. He starts making decisions based on his own preferences. He learns what he actually enjoys. He reconnects with old interests. He creates routines that belong entirely to him. Maybe he starts working on classic cars in his garage. Maybe he travels. Maybe he spends more time with friends. Maybe he finally pursues something he postponed for years. And every time he handles another challenge on his own, he builds a powerful internal belief. I can do this. Psychologists often describe a similar idea through the concept of self-efficacy, the confidence that grows when we experience ourselves as capable of handling life's demands. It is not created by positive thinking. It is created through evidence. The first time he fixes a problem in his home without help. The first holiday season he gets through after the divorce. the first difficult moment when he realizes he can survive without depending on another person to stabilize him. Slowly, being alone stops feeling like something that happened to him. It becomes something he knows how to do, and eventually it becomes part of who he is. He is no longer thinking, "I happen to live alone." He begins thinking, "I am someone who has built a life on my own." That distinction matters because identity is powerful. Once something becomes part of how we see ourselves, we naturally protect it. For some men, that protection is healthy. They are not avoiding love. They simply discovered that a relationship should add to their life, not define it. They no longer need marriage to prove that they are successful, valuable, or complete. And for many men from Generation X, this realization can be especially significant, because many grew up with a very specific idea of masculinity. Be strong, handle your problems, don't complain, figure it out, keep moving. For many men, emotional expression was never something they were taught to practice. They learned how to solve problems, they learned how to provide, they learned how to protect, but they were not always taught how to explain fear, insecurity, loneliness, or emotional needs. A man might know exactly how to repair a broken appliance, negotiate at work, or support his family during a crisis. But when someone asks, "What are you feeling?" the answer may not come as easily, not because he has no emotions, because he learned to transform emotions into action. He fixes, he works, he stays busy, he moves forward. And sometimes that strength becomes part of the reason he struggles with intimacy, because intimacy requires something different. It requires being seen. Not only the competent version, not only the reliable version, but the uncertain version, the vulnerable version, the version that does not always have the answer. And for someone who built his entire identity around being capable, allowing another person close can feel strangely uncomfortable, especially after experiencing a painful relationship, because the human mind learns from experience. If a past relationship was filled with conflict, disappointment, betrayal, or emotional exhaustion, the brain may begin connecting closeness with danger, not consciously, not intentionally, but through patterns. A person may begin thinking, "Relationships take away my peace. Commitment means losing my freedom. Getting close means eventually getting hurt." And suddenly staying single becomes more than a preference. It becomes protection. Because avoiding emotional risk creates immediate relief. No difficult conversations, no uncertainty, no possibility of rejection, no chance of repeating the same mistakes. The mind loves solutions that reduce discomfort. The problem is that a strategy created for protection can eventually become a prison. A man might say, "I just don't want drama." And maybe he truly values peace. But sometimes that sentence can also mean, "I don't want to feel powerless again." That is where the difference becomes difficult to see. Two men can live the same lifestyle. Both are single. Both enjoy their independence. Both spend weekends alone. Both say they are happy. But internally, their experiences may be completely different. One man feels peaceful. He knows he could open his life to someone if the right person appeared. His independence gives him freedom. The other man feels safe only because nobody can get close enough to hurt him. His independence gives him protection. From the outside, they look the same. Inside, they are living completely different realities. This is why the question is not whether a man remarried. Marriage alone does not prove emotional health. A person can marry because they fear being alone. A person can stay single because they have found genuine balance. The important question is whether the choice comes from freedom or fear. Can he connect without feeling trapped? Can he trust without feeling weak? Can he accept support without believing he has failed? Can he allow someone into his life without feeling that he is losing himself? These questions reveal something deeper about identity. Because sometimes people do not stay alone because they failed to find someone. Sometimes they stay alone because they finally built a life where they no longer need someone else to prove they are whole. But sometimes that same identity can hide something unresolved. The belief that "I don't need anyone" can be a powerful form of independence. But if a person needs to repeat it constantly, defend it aggressively, or use it to dismiss all forms of closeness, it may be protecting something more fragile underneath. A healthy identity creates options. A defensive identity removes them. A man who has truly accepted his independence can still love. He can still compromise. He can still change. He does not see relationships as a threat to who he is. They are simply one possible addition to a life he already values. But a man who has turned independence into armor may feel that any emotional closeness threatens everything he worked so hard to rebuild. And this is where the story becomes more human. Because people are rarely one thing. A man can be strong and still afraid, independent and still lonely sometimes, content and still curious about connection. He can appreciate his freedom while carrying old wounds. Human beings are complicated because our choices are often built from multiple experiences at the same time. The man who never remarried may have found peace. He may have protected himself. He may have done both. Maybe his divorce taught him what he truly values. Maybe it taught him what he never wants to experience again. Maybe his single life is a celebration of who he became. Maybe it is also a reminder of what he lost. The important thing is not to judge the empty chair beside him. The empty chair does not tell the whole story. A quiet home does not automatically mean loneliness. A wedding ring missing from his hand does not automatically mean something is missing from his life. The deeper question is what his solitude means to him. Does it feel like freedom, or does it feel like safety from something he is afraid to face? Does he live alone because he enjoys his own company, or because he no longer believes anyone can be trusted with his? Does he not need someone, or did he learn never to expect someone? Because those are very different things. And perhaps the most meaningful form of emotional maturity is not needing another person to complete you, but also not building a life where nobody is allowed to reach you. True independence is not the inability to need, it is the ability to choose closeness, to choose distance, to choose connection without losing yourself. So the next time you see a man from Generation X who never remarried after a major relationship, maybe the story is not what you assumed. Maybe he did not fail at love. Maybe he rebuilt himself. Maybe he found a version of life that fits him. Or maybe, somewhere beneath the confidence and independence, there is still a part of him wondering whether letting someone in would mean losing everything he worked so hard to protect. The answer is not found in his relationship status. It is found in the relationship he has with himself. Because sometimes staying alone is a sign that someone finally learned they are enough. And sometimes it is a sign that they learned how to survive without allowing themselves to be truly known. The difference between the two is where the real story begins. If this story made you reflect on your own choices, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more conversations about psychology, identity, and the hidden reasons behind human behavior, subscribe for more.